Inside a vast conference center on the outer skirt of Milan, Zegna erect a simulacrum of the Australian meadows where their sheep graze. Real grass underfoot, enormous screens showing the animals in their actual habitat. The finest wool in the world sat in a glass display case at the entrance like a museum artifact. Guests are being asked to look at raw material the way you would look at a gem. Across town, a different house, Loro Piana set up a live installation, an artisan at work alongside the debut of a new yarn. 2 years of research, mulberry silk and 15-micron cashmere, introduced without fanfare. Just a craft person in the corner of a room, doing its thing. Two brands, two rooms, the same conviction that the most radical thing you can do in the fashion industry right now is show people where the material comes from and trust them to understand why it matters. Welcome to Zena's Massif. Think of us as a concierge of new perspective. The stories that hide in plain sight. The investment of an unacquired taste. I'm your host, Mr. Lu. Today, Zegna and Loro Piana, and what I think they're actually selling, which has very little to do with clothing and everything to do with a certain kind of conviction. It starts with the TV show Succession. I was watching Logan Roy, our main character, move through a room and I noticed something. He never had a logo on him. His children didn't either, the ones with taste. No statement being made through clothing, the statement came through comportment, through how her jacket felt, through the fact that nothing ever seemed to bind or bulk or betray. The clothes were just there. Logan Roy is a man who could wear anything. The media mogul controlled the information flow of Western Hemisphere. He wears nothing remarkable, and that's exactly the point. Power at that level doesn't seek permission from its wardrobe. The wardrobe simply agrees with everything else about the man. When costume designer Michelle Matland dressed the Roy family, she was making an argument that real authority doesn't announce itself. It simply occupies the room. Then I start paying attention to other TV shows, such as Billion, the rival of Bobby Axelrod, Mike, in the last season. He wears Loro Piana sweaters, the ones that cost more than most people's rent. Then The White Lotus, where the guest wears things with quiet certainty that read as effortless and is anything but. Also, Big Little Lies, the same visual grammar recurring. A certain kind of person who has stopped needing to announce it themselves. Idea of old money style was smuggled into mainstream culture through prestige television. The showrunners and costume designers knew exactly what they were doing. They dressed power in restraint, and millions of viewers absorbed the lesson without realizing they were being schooled. It's a remarkable culture's sleight of hand. You watch 7 seasons of characters in $4,000 sweater and gradually your eyes get trained. You start seeing things you didn't see before, a fabric, a silhouette, the absence of branding as a form of branding. But the show can only introduce you to the idea. It cannot replicate the feeling of the actual thing against your skin. That part, the conversion, happened in the store, and it happened to me twice in a way I didn't expect. My first Zegna piece came from their Brooksville store in New York. I walked in for something that could handle a New York winter without turning me into a man-shaped sleeping bag. What I walked out with was the OSC Cashmere Element Vita jacket. It weighs exactly it should, light enough to not be a burden, substantial enough that you know it carries quality. You put it on, and the cold simply stopped mattering because cashmere at this level creates a kind of equilibrium. You are warm and you can move. You don't look like you prepare for a blizzard, but you do look like yourself, just better insulated. The OAC line runs cashmere through a process that makes it wind resistant without touching the hand, the feel of the fabric. The result is a garment that performs like technical outwear and feels like something you might have worn to the opera, both at once. That's genuinely hard to do, and most brands that attempt it compromise one end to the equation. Zegna doesn't. What I remember about that afternoon in the Brooksville store is that Nobody rushed me. Nobody performed over enthusiasm. The staff operated with a quiet assurance of people who know they are working with something good and don't need to convince you of it. They gave me the space and quietness to wander around and recommend the jacket when I need them to. That restraint, that confidence itself is a form of communication. But the story I keep coming back has nothing to do with the jacket. It has to do with one of my important documents for work. I left an important document at Brooksville location, left it, got on a plane, was aboard before I realized, and then the story called. Then texted. They told me the document was secure, and when I came back, it would be waiting for me, as if guarantee the safety of a customer's forgotten paper across time zone was the most natural thing in the world. When I returned, it was there, handed to me like they were my confidant. I have stayed in five-star hotels that couldn't manage that. The Zegna staff did it as a reflex. Without ceremony, without making it a performance of exceptional service, they just did it for me. It's not a customer service story, it's a culture story. The difference matters between customer service can be scripted, culture cannot. Culture is what happens when nobody's watching and the right things gets done anyway. Erman Gildo, the founder of Zegna, was 18 years old on the May 11, 1910, when he signed the paper that founded a wool mill in Trevero, a town in the Biella Alps so unremarkable that most Italians couldn't place it on a map. His father, Angelo, was a watchmaker, a man trained to care about precision, about the interior logic of small things working perfectly together, about the gap between what could be made and what had been made. Zegna pointed that disposition at fabric, specifically at the question of what the most beautiful fabric in the world would feel like. He traveled to Australia to source merino wool when international travel means weeks at sea. He went to Mongolia. He understood that quality is upstream. You cannot rescue poor fiber with good craftsmanship. The fleece determines everything. That insight sounds simple and is, in practice, extremely rare. Most people in any industry try to fix problem at the end of the process. Zegna went to the beginning. By the 1930s, he had planted 500,000 trees around Trevero, built the Panoramica Zegna Road through the mountains, put up a hospital, a school, a swimming pool for his workers. The Oasis Zegna, 100 square kilometers of protected nature, predates the concept of corporate social responsibility by 60 years. He did it because he lived there and the land was his responsibility. There was no audience for this generosity, no press release, no ESG report. Just a man who believed that the community sustaining his mill was worth sustaining in return. That philosophy, the idea that what you build around your work is as important as the work itself, runs through everything Zegna does today. The new logo is built around Road 232, the mountain road the founder constructed a century earlier. Alessandro Sartori, their artistic director since 2016, talks about garment the way architects talk about buildings. The structure underneath must be honest before anything on the surface can be beautiful. Shirts that become jackets, outerwear that sinks like sportswear. The hierarchy of function before form, always. In fiscal year 2024, the Zegna brand grew 4.9% to a 1.16 billion in revenue. 78% of brand sales now come through directly operated stores, 281 locations globally. The Americas grows over 15% year on year. These are the numbers of a brand that controls the conversation in every market it enters and chooses its market with intention. My relationship with Loro Piana started at their Chelsea store in New York. I came in for the roadster jacket, cashmere treated with storm system technology, wind and water resistant without sacrificing what makes cashmere worth having. I also picked up the Empire overshirt, which they call a gift of the kings, a description that earns itself the moment you put it on. Both pieces were for a trip to Copenhagen. At some point, I returned one of the items. The Chelsea team was warm in a way that as personal rather than trained. No friction, the performance of graciousness that's really just brand scripting. Returning something feel like a conversation rather than transaction. I want to stay on that for a second, because the return experience at a luxury store tells you more about the brand than the sales does. Any brand can make the purchase feel good. There's momentum in the sale, a nature current of enthusiasm. The return is where the current reverses. How a brand handles that reversal tells you everything about whether the relationship is real. The Loro Piana Chelsea team made it feel real. I walked out feeling better about the brand than I walked in. That is a high bar to clear. Then it comes to Rome. I was in their store on Via Cantotti, one of those streets where the architect does half of the selling before you step inside, where the stone themselves have absorbed a few centuries of refinement. It came up in conversation that I had purchased with them in New York. I've been asking about their bespoke pieces, the tier of the brand that operate without a public price list, the commissions that exist in the space between what's in the store and what can be imagined. The staff in Rome read the room. They understood I was asking because I genuinely want to know, not price shopping, not doing research for an article, just a person who had crossed the threshold of the brand and wanted to understand how deep it went. So they brought out a code that had been custom made for another client, waiting to be collected. Someone else's private commission in the store as a fact, not as a merchandise. Then they let me try it on. It was vicuña made in hunter green, a color so particular and so right that describe it as green feels like calling a Caravaggio a painting. The cut was precise in the way bespoke tailoring can be, following the body's logic rather than a block patterns, structured at the shoulders and easy through the body in proportions that looked inevitable. The cashmere had a weight and drape that the ready to wear even at Loro Piana's level rarely achieves. And on the sleeves, quiet but legible, a price tag, 28,000 euro. There are numbers that reframe a room. That was one of them. What I remember most is the feeling about being let into something. The staff in Rome extended trust. They decided I was worth the gesture. Standing in someone else's 28,000 euro code on Via Cantonte felt less like shopping and more like being amid somewhere. A secret shared between people who speak the same language. No loyalty program, no CRM system, no campaign manufactured that moment. It comes from a brand culture that trains its staff to read people, give them the latitude to act on that reading, and trust the result. The coat went back on the hanger. I walked out into the Rome afternoon with nothing purchased but completely won over. Loro Piana was founded in April 2nd, 1922. Pietro Loro Piana, an engineer, a detail that keeps appearing in these Italian heritage brand histories and is never incidental, established the company in Quanora, a small town in the Piedmont Hill. The family had been trading wool since the early 1800s, sixth generation of people who woke up thinking about fiber. Quanora and Treviro are separated by a mountain range. Two families, same region, same obsession, and same era. What strikes me about this geography is that it wasn't coincidence. The Biella Alps has been a textile center for centuries because the water there has low in mineral, cold, exceptionally pure, was ideal for processing wool. The quality of the fabric began with the quality of the water it was washed in. Both Zegna and Loro Piana's families understood this, so they both stayed. Pierluigi Loro Piana was known for saying a handshake was worth more than any signed contract. That philosophy built a sourcing network still functioning today on trust established 50 years ago. Shippers in Mongolia, farming community in the Andes, merino growers in New Zealand and Australia. They don't just buy cashmere, they have opinion about which valleys in Mongolia produce the softest underfleece and why. That level of knowledge takes generations to accumulate, and cannot be purchased when you need it. The vicuña. Wild animals living at altitude in the Andes, each yielding 250 grams of fiber once every 2 years. Loro Piana secured right to work with this fiber in the 1990s and simultaneously financed conservation programs for a species that had been hunted nearly to extinction by the mid-20th century. The population has since recovered dramatically. A vicuña coat represents years of animal conservation work, hand-gathered by indigenous community and crafted at a finished mill in Biella. The €28,000 price tag on a vicuña commission is a ledger of all of that. Baby cashmere is sourced from Hercus goat kids under 1 year old. 30 grams per animal harvested once in its lifetime. The fiber measures 13.5 micron in diameter. At that finest, the vocabulary of softness runs out. You are wearing something that has no adequate description in ordinary language. LVMH acquired 80% of Loro Piana in 2013 for €2 billion. By early 2016, they hold 94%, with the brand now valued at approximately €10 billion. Bernard Arnault said it plainly at an investor event. Ball for two, worth 10. The Loro Piana family stay involved by design. There's institution knowledge of where the best fiber comes from, and the relationship that gives them access to it is not something LVMH could have assembled on its own in any reasonable time frame. Loro Piana also sells candles, children's toy, baby blanket in cashmere, object with no functional relationship to outerwear or tailoring. My first instinct was skeptical. Pure extension, revenue diversification, the inevitable luxury brand drift into lifestyle. Then I thought longer about who actually buys a Loro Piana cashmere toy for a child and what that act means. The answer is someone who has already internalized the brand's value system and wants to transmit it before a child can read the label. You're buying the beginning of a sensibility. A child who grew up wrapping that quality of material learns at a tactile level that no education can replicate, that softness can be a standard, that the thing around you can be made with full attention, that there is a difference between something made quickly and something made well. The candles extended the brand into your room, into rooms where you are not thinking about fashion at all. When someone notices it, and they will, if they knew, the signal is received without a word being said. This is how taste actually propagate in the world, through objects in rooms, through the texture of daily life, through things that have been chosen rather than accumulated. The brand is in the blanket the child is wrapped in. It is in the room before anyone arrives. There is something almost philosophical about a fashion house making children's toy. It is an admission that brand's real aspiration is to be woven into a life, not just a wardrobe. That the conversation they want to have is not seasonal, but generational. Loro Piana understood this decades before quiet luxury became a search term. The lifestyle pieces are the fashion business deepest argument, that a certain standard of making should inhabit every dimension of how you live, including the object your children carry into sleep. After spending real time with both brands, putting money in, watching the product perform across cities and seasons, moving through their store and paying attention how the experience holds, here's what I've landed on. They are selling a specific relationship to time. Everything else in fashion is organized around urgency. The drop economy compressed entire arc of desire and acquisition into minutes. You are asked to want, decide, and purchase faster than you can think. Because a considered customer is a dangerous customer. Consideration leads to comparison. Comparison leads to patience. Patience is the enemy of the hype cycle. Zegna and Loro Piana operate on the opposite logic entirely. Vicuña sourcing requires years of relationship building before a single gram of fiber changes hands. The merino wool in a Zegna jacket is tracked from a specific farm in New South Wales where they have a direct relationship with the grower. Cashmere goes through Loro Piana on labs at the micron level before thread is spun. By the time a garment reaches the store floor, it has accumulated years of intentional decisions. You feel that accumulation when you touch it. Something registered that sits below conscious state. An almost physical sense that this object was made by people who care about what they were making at every stage of making. The garments themselves are built on the same logic. The Loro Piana roaster I own was a relevant design 30 years ago. It will be relevant design 30 years from now. Not because it's conservative. Look at how Satori has evolved the Zegna silhouette over the past decade, and you will see genuine contemporary vision at work. But because the underlying commitment is to form that serve the body rather than the season, structure as foundation, aesthetic as expression of that structure. In that order, always. For anyone building something, a fund, a portfolio, a practice, the model is worth studying. Know your material completely. Control the supply chain from as far upstream as you can reach. Build relationship that outlasts any individual transaction. Design for the person who will hold this in 10 years, not the person who needs to feel something today. The OSC Zegna was planted in the 1930s. Those trees are almost 100 years old now. That's the timeline these families think in, and it shows in everything they make. Frederick Arnold becomes CEO of Loro Piana in May 2025. He has history of modernized heritage brand without damaging it, a genuine rare skill, and not an accident of timing or luck. The question at Loro Piana is the same one every brand eventually faces. How do you speak to a generation that discovers the concept through Instagram, TikTok, without flattening the very thing that made it worth discovering in the first place? The centenary exhibition approach. Immersive, narrative-driven, built around 100 years of sourcing knowledge, feels like the right direction. Let people find the knowledge. Let the exclusivity come from the depths of understanding, not from the performance of it. A hard question is supply chain's ethic. Loro Piana's Vicuña sourcing come under scrutiny in 2024 over how indigenous Peruvian communities are compensated for their role in harvesting the fiber. Pierluigi Loro Piana built his entire philosophy on the idea that a handshake is more than a contract, meaning the relationship carries a moral weight that paperwork alone cannot satisfy. That principle has to hold when it's inconvenient. The brand's long-term credibility with its most engaged customer depends on how seriously they take that obligation. Zegna's position in America is strong and getting stronger. Double-digit DTC growth and a customer base that has developed real fluency in Italian heritage menswear. A store network expanding with discipline. China remains complicated across the sector, and Zegna isn't immune. But the strategic call is right. Protect brand equity over short-term revenue. Revenue is recoverable. The filiera, their fully owned supply chain from the sheep farm in New South Wales to the finished mills in Milan. This is the kind of structural advantage that takes generations to build and cannot be acquired when you decide you need it. From watching the fictional family navigate power in well-made clothes to standing on Via Condotte in a 28,000 euro coat that wasn't mine. That's the actual story of how taste gets educated. It starts with a glimpse of something operating at a different altitude. It proceeds through curiosity. It arrives eventually at a physical experience that either confirms everything the glimpse suggested or quietly collapses it. Zegna and Loro Piana are exceptionally good at confirmation. A century of practice will do that. What keeps the loyalty of customers who have access to anything is that they never confuse the garment with the marketing. The garment itself is the core. The store experience, the staff culture, the bespoke tier, and the candle on the shelf. Those are the contexts in which surrounded the core. The garment is always the heart. Let us know, what is missing in your wardrobe? Would you choose Loro Piana or Zegna? Drop us a message, leave a comment. We are genuinely curious. And every week, we will dedicate an episode to your question and stories. This is Zena's Massif. Thank you for being here. Next episode, we are following the trend of fashion discovery. We are going to Paris.